The conference room floated in the darkness of space, suspended within Nexus Station like a jewel in the void. Through the massive windows, stars stretched endlessly in all directions. Ambassador Daeho Kim stood at the long table, his hands pressed flat against the cold surface. Across from him, High Arbiter Thelvin towered nearly 8 feet tall, his 4 eyes gleaming with what Daeho had learned to recognize as contempt. "You ask for what you have not earned," Thelvin said, his translator converting his clicking speech into flat, emotionless words. The frontier reaches belong to the Velkhari Dominion by right of discovery and strength. Daeho forced himself to remain calm. They had been arguing for 3 months now. 3 months of careful diplomacy, of trying to find common ground with an empire that saw humanity as nothing more than upstart children playing at civilization. Behind him, Captain Young-Mi Park stood at attention, her military uniform crisp and proper. She had warned him this would happen. To her right, Dr. Tae-Soon Lee studied his datapad, tracking every word, every gesture, looking for some way to break through the Velkhari's arrogance. "Our colony ships reached the frontier reaches at the same time as your survey fleets," Dae said carefully. "Both our peoples discovered those worlds together. Shared development benefits everyone. The resources there could fuel both our civilizations for centuries." Thelvin's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. "Your species has existed in space for barely 200 years. The Dominion has ruled the stars for 4,000. You speak to us of rights and sharing as if we are equals. We are not." Young-Mi shifted slightly beside Daeho. He knew that movement. She was getting angry. He placed a subtle hand gesture behind his back, telling her to stay calm. They needed to make this work. War with the Velkhari would be catastrophic. Intelligence reports said the Dominion controlled over 400 worlds and fielded 8,000 warships. Humanity had 47 colonies and 1,200 ships. The math was simple and terrifying. "We don't claim to be your equals in age or territory," Daeho said. "But we are equals in our right to exist, to expand, to build futures for our children. Surely the great Velkhari Dominion can understand this basic truth." For a moment, Thelvin said nothing. His 4 eyes studied Daeho with an expression the ambassador couldn't read. Then the High Arbiter gestured to one of his aides, who approached with a holographic display. Images flickered to life above the table, showing a human survey ship, the CSS Endeavor, floating peacefully near an asteroid field in the disputed zone. "This vessel entered Dominion space 4 days ago," Thelvin said. "It was warned. It refused to leave. It has been dealt with." The image shifted. A Velkhari warship appeared, massive and angular, bristling with weapons. Bright lances of energy erupted from its hull. The Endeavor exploded in silence, breaking apart into spinning fragments. Dadha felt his blood turn to ice. "That ship carried 237 people," he whispered. "Scientists, families, children. It carried trespassers," Thelvin said simply. "This is the consequence of ignoring Dominion authority. Consider it a lesson." Young-Mi took a step forward, her face flushed with rage. "You murdered civilian colonists and call it a lesson?" Thelvin's mandibles spread wide, definitely laughter this time. "We removed pests from our territory. If you insist on calling it murder, then yes, we murdered them. What will you do about it?" Ho grabbed Young-Mi's arm before she could say something that would make everything worse. His mind raced. 237 people. Gone. Vaporized because the Velkhari saw them as insects to be swatted. He thought of the families back on Terra Nova who would receive the news. Parents, children, lovers, all waiting for people who would never come home. "The Terran Coalition demands accountability," Gaio said, his voice shaking despite his best efforts. Those people were under the protection of our government. Their deaths require justice. Justice? Thelvin leaned forward, his massive form casting a shadow across the table. You want justice? Then hear the justice of the Dominion. You have 30 days to withdraw from 12 of your colonies nearest to the frontier reaches. After 30 days, any human presence in those systems will be eradicated. Not captured. Not relocated. Eradicated. This negotiation is concluded. The High Arbiter turned and walked toward the exit, his entourage following. At the door, he paused and looked back at Deo. Your species is young and foolish, Thelvin said. You have not learned that the galaxy belongs to the strong. Perhaps this lesson will teach you humility. If any of you survive it. The door sealed behind the Valkyrie delegation with a soft hiss. For a long moment, nobody in the human group spoke. Deho stared at the space where the hologram had shown the Endeavor's destruction, playing over and over in his mind. We need to contact Coalition Command immediately, Young Mi said quietly. They need to know war is coming. War, Tae-Sung repeated, looking up from his datapad. His face was pale. Against an enemy with 8,000 ships. Daiho, we can't win that war. Nobody can. Daiho closed his eyes. He had failed. Despite all his training, all his careful words and diplomatic skill, he had failed to prevent this. 237 people were dead, and now millions more might follow. The Velkari saw humanity as nothing more than an inconvenience to be erased. Get me a secure channel to Terra Nova, he said finally. President Nam needs to hear this directly from me. As they left the conference room, Deho glanced back at the window. Through the glass, he could see distant points of light. Ships, Velkari ships. Young Mi followed his gaze, and her jaw tightened. Their battle fleets are already mobilizing, she said. They made their decision before these negotiations even started. This was all theater for them. They were always going to do this. Daiho nodded slowly. The Velkari had dismissed humanity as weak, as insignificant, as pests to be exterminated. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Humanity had been fighting wars since before it left Earth. Humanity knew what it meant to struggle for survival against impossible odds. The Velkari had been at peace for 3 centuries, crushing primitive species that couldn't fight back. They asked what we would do about it, Daiho said softly, still watching those distant warships. Let's go tell our people exactly what we're going to do about it. The obsidian chamber lived up to its name. Black walls absorbed light rather than reflected it, making the massive room feel both infinite and claustrophobic. President Haijin Nam sat at the head of the circular table, her face illuminated by the holographic displays floating in the air before her. Around her, the Coalition Council had assembled in emergency session. Every face showed the same mixture of fear and anger. Fleet Admiral Ji Woo Choi stood before the gathered leaders, his uniform bearing the silver stars of his rank. Behind him, tactical displays showed the reality of their situation in cold, unforgiving numbers. Red markers indicated Velkari territory, a massive sprawl of conquered space. Blue markers showed human colonies, small and scattered by comparison. The Velkari Dominion controls 417 worlds, Jiwoo said. His voice steady despite the dire information he delivered. Their military consists of approximately 8,300 warships, ranging from corvettes to dreadnoughts. Their quantum disruptor technology gives them a significant advantage in direct ship-to-ship combat. Counselor Byung-Ho Han, representative from the outer colonies, slammed his fist on the table. How do we fight that? We have 47 worlds and 1,200 ships. They outnumber us 7-1. 8-1 in ships, Ji Woo corrected calmly. But numbers aren't everything. Numbers are exactly everything in warfare, another counselor protested. We need to consider evacuation. Load what ships we can. Run deep into uncharted space. Start over somewhere they'll never find us. Run? Young Mi Park stepped forward from where she stood along the wall. She had arrived directly from Nexus Station, still in her dress uniform, still carrying the weight of what she had witnessed. They just murdered 237 civilians because they felt like it. They've given us 30 days to abandon 12 colonies, homes to 4 million people. You want to reward that behavior by running away? I want our species to survive, the counselor shot back. President Nam raised her hand, calling for silence. The room obeyed immediately. Hai-Jin had led the coalition for 8 years, through economic troubles, through first contact with alien species, through the careful building of humanity's interstellar civilization. She was 63 years old, gray hair pulled back in a simple style, and her eyes held the weight of every decision she had ever made. Admiral Choi, she said quietly, you mentioned that numbers aren't everything. Explain. Ji Woo nodded and changed the tactical display. New information flooded the screens. The Valkyrie have been at peace for 300 years. The last war they fought was against the Silith, a primitive species armed with chemical rockets and nuclear weapons. The Valkyrie won that war in 6 months through overwhelming numerical superiority. Before that, their conflicts were even less challenging. And this is supposed to make us feel better? Counselor Han asked. It should, Intelligence Director Sung Ho Kong said, moving to stand beside the Admiral. Sung Ho was younger than most in Inost. Room barely 40, but his eyes were old. He had spent 20 years in intelligence work, analyzing threats, predicting enemy behavior. The Valkyrie don't know how to fight a peer enemy. They don't know asymmetric warfare. They don't know guerrilla tactics. They don't know what it means to be desperate. But we do, Young Mi said softly. Sung Ho nodded. Humanity spent 10,000 years fighting itself. We nearly destroyed our own planet 3 times. We know warfare in ways the Valkyrie can't imagine. We know how to fight when we're outnumbered. We know how to turn enemy strength into weakness. Chief Scientist Minna Song stood from her seat at the table. She was 55, her hair showing streaks of white, her hands marked with old chemical burns from decades in laboratories. After first contact with the Valkyrie, when we realized they might become hostile, we developed contingency plans. Military doctrines we hoped we would never need to use. Technologies that we kept secret even from most of our own people. Project Prometheus, President Nam said. It wasn't a question. Min nodded. Project Prometheus. A complete military doctrine built around humanity's advantages. Stealth technology that makes our ships invisible to Valkyrie sensors. Adaptive AI that learns and evolves during combat. Quantum camouflage. Infiltration drones. Psychological warfare protocols. And weapons. So many weapons designed specifically to counter Valkyrie advantages. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Ji Woo brought up new displays, showing ships and weapons that most of the Council had never seen before. Stealth carriers that could deploy strike craft inside enemy defensive perimeters. Cyber warfare suites that could turn Valkyrie computers against them. Marines trained to fight in conditions that would paralyze their enemies. You're talking about total war, Counselor Han said slowly. Not just defense, offense, striking at their worlds. I'm talking about survival, Jiwoo replied. The Valkyrie have made their intentions clear. They see us as pests to be exterminated. If we fight defensively, if we simply try to hold what we have, they will grind us down through attrition. Their numbers will win eventually. But if we attack, if we hit them where they don't expect it, if we show them that humanity is not prey to be hunted, then maybe, just maybe, we can force them to see us as equals. President Nam stood, walking to the holographic displays. She studied the tactical information, the ship designs, the weapon specifications. Her face showed nothing of what she was thinking. Finally, she turned back to face the council. "This is the decision point," she said. "We can try to evacuate, scatter into the dark, and hope they don't hunt us down. We can surrender, abandon our colonies, submit to Valkyrie authority, and pray they show us mercy. Or we can fight. Fight and likely lose," someone muttered. "Fight and definitely make them pay for every inch," young me corrected sharply. "Fight and show every species in this galaxy that humanity won't go quietly into extinction." Sung Ho pulled up a final image, the recording of the Endeavor's destruction. Everyone in the room had seen it already, but he made them watch it again. The peaceful survey ship, the Valkyrie warship, the brief, one-sided slaughter. 237 lives ended in an instant because the Valkyrie thought they could. "They did this because they don't respect us," Sung Ho said. "Because they think we're weak. Because in 300 years of peace, they've forgotten what it means to face an enemy that fights back. Let's remind them." President Nam looked around the table at each counselor in turn. She saw fear in their eyes, but also anger, determination. Humanity had clawed its way up from caves to the stars through sheer stubborn will to survive. That will hadn't disappeared just because they now traveled between worlds. "Vote," she said simply. "War or surrender?" The vote wasn't even close. 41 counselors for war, 6 for evacuation, none for surrender. Hai-Jin felt the weight of that decision settle onto her shoulders. How many would die because of the choice they had just made? How many mothers would lose children? How many futures would be cut short? But the alternative was extinction or slavery, and that was no alternative at all. "Admiral Choi," she said formally, "activate Project Prometheus. Authorization code. Cry Havoc." Ji Woo saluted. "Yes, Madam President." The Valkyrie wanted to see humanity without our diplomatic masks. Let's show them what we really are. Captain Haiyan Wu Lim stood on the bridge at the CSS Sejong, watching the stars slide past in the viewscreen. His ship was a stealth carrier, one of humanity's best-kept secrets, invisible to Valkyrie sensors, thanks to quantum camouflage technology. Around him, his crew worked in focused silence, preparing for what came next. "Status," Haiyan Wu said quietly. Lieutenant Yoonji Bae looked up from her tactical station. She was 28, one of the youngest senior officers in the fleet, but her record spoke for itself. All systems nominal. Quantum camouflage, holding at 98% efficiency. Strike craft armed and ready. We're approaching Kelthar Prime's orbital perimeter now. Kelthar Prime was one of the Valkyrie Dominion's primary fortress worlds, home to massive shipyards where dozens of warships were under construction at any given time. Intelligence estimated 400 ships in various stages of completion, along with 300 more providing defensive coverage. Taking this target was supposed to be impossible. Humanity was about to prove otherwise. "Bring us to full stop 2,000 kilometers from the primary shipyard," Haiyan Wu ordered. "Maintain camouflage. Launch when ready." The Sejong's hangar bays opened in silence, releasing 50 strike craft. Each one was small, fast, and nearly invisible. Each carried enough firepower to cripple a cruiser. They spread out through the orbital space around Kelthar, prime like a swarm of predatory insects. Haiyan Wu switched his view to the tactical display. It showed Kelthar Prime's defenses in detail, gathered from months of covert surveillance. The Valkyrie had powerful sensors and heavy weapons, but they were looking for threats approaching from normal space. They weren't looking for enemies already among them. "Sir," Yoonji said, her voice tight with focus, "I'm reading similar signatures across the system. Looks like the other task forces are in position." Project Prometheus wasn't just hitting one target. Right now, across 50 different Valkyrie systems, human strike forces were moving into position. In the next hour, humanity would announce its presence in the war with overwhelming force. All strike craft report ready, Yunji continued. Waiting on your order, sir. Haiyan Wu thought about the endeavor. About 237 people who had died because the Valkyrie saw them as pests. He thought about the ultimatum, about 4 million people told to abandon their homes or die. He thought about High Arbiter Thelvain's arrogant face, asking what humanity would do about it. Execute Operation Thunderclap, he said. Show them what we do about it. The strike craft attacked in perfect synchronization. Missiles and energy weapons lanced out, targeting the massive shipyards where Valkyrie warships waited, incomplete and defenseless. Explosions blossomed across orbital space in brilliant flowers of destruction. Ships that had taken months to build died in seconds. Alarms began screaming across Kelthar Prime's defensive network. Valkyrie warships powered weapons and shields, searching desperately for targets they couldn't see. Return fire lanced through space, hitting nothing. The strike craft were already gone, repositioning, attacking again from a different angle. They're panicking, Yunji reported, monitoring Valkyrie communications. They can't get a lock on anything. Their quantum disruptors are useless if they don't know where to shoot. On the view screen, a massive Valkyrie dreadnought exploded as a human missile found its reactor core. Debris spread outward in a slow-motion wave. Haiyan Wu watched impassively. He took no pleasure in the destruction, but he wouldn't flinch from it either. This was war. The Valkyrie had started it. Humanity would finish it. Secondary targets, he ordered. Command stations, sensor arrays, communication hubs. Cut them off from each other. The strike craft shifted their focus, and soon the entire orbital defense network around Kelthar Prime was in chaos. Ships collided trying to avoid fire they couldn't see. Stations went dark as human weapons took them offline. In 15 minutes, 3 centuries of Valkyrie military supremacy began to crack. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, similar scenes played out. Special Operations Commander J. Hyon Park led a boarding team onto the Valkyrie flagship, Dominion's Fist. His Marines moved through the ship's corridors like ghosts, using darkness and fear as weapons. The Valkyrie were physically strong, but they weren't used to fighting in cramped spaces against an enemy that controlled the environment. J. Hyon's team disabled the lights, disabled gravity, filled the air with sounds designed to trigger primitive fear responses. The Valkyrie crew stumbled through their own ship, terrified, unable to organize a defense. When J. Hyon finally confronted High Admiral Korfeval on the flagship's bridge, the Valkyrie commander was shaking. You surrender or you die, J. Hyon said simply in the Valkyrie language. Choose now. Korfeval chose surrender. His crew laid down their weapons. J. Hyon secured the ship's battle plans and command codes, intelligence that would prove invaluable in the days to come. Back on the Sejong, Yunji pulled up a tactical overview of the entire operation. Across 50 systems, human forces were achieving objectives with minimal casualties. Valkyrie shipyards burned. Command stations went offline. The mighty Dominion military was reeling. Casualty reports coming in, she said. We lost 3 strike craft at Kelthar Prime. Across all theaters, we're looking at maybe 40 ships total. Valkyrie losses, she paused, checking the numbers again to make sure they were correct. Valkyrie losses are estimated at over 2,000 ships destroyed or captured. Sir, we just crippled 20% of their entire military in one coordinated strike. Haiyan Wu nodded slowly. The plan had worked better than even the most optimistic projections. But this was just the opening move. The Valkyrie would respond with fury. The real test would come when they gathered their remaining forces and came looking for revenge. "Recall the strike craft," he ordered. "Plot a course out of the system. We'll regroup with the main fleet and prepare for the next phase." As the Sejong turned away from the burning ruins of Kelthar Prime's defenses, Haiyan Wu allowed himself a moment to feel the weight of what they had just done. Thousands of Velkari were dead. Ships that had taken years to build were scattered debris. War was ugly, even when it was necessary, but the Endeavor's crew hadn't had a choice in their deaths. The colonists facing evacuation hadn't started this war. Humanity was fighting for survival, and in that fight, Haiyan Wu would do whatever was necessary. The galaxy was about to learn something the Velkari had forgotten. Never mistake kindness for weakness. Never assume that a species that prefers peace doesn't know how to wage war. And never, ever threaten humanity's children. Nexus Station had never been so crowded. Dozens of alien species sent representatives to the neutral hub, all wanting to witness what was happening. The impossible war. The upstart humans against the mighty Velkari Dominion. Most had expected the conflict to last a few weeks at most, ending with humanity's complete defeat. Nobody expected what actually happened. Ambassador Su Jin-han stood before the gathered delegates, her image broadcast across the galaxy. She was 52, a career diplomat who had spent her life building bridges between species. Now she was tasked with explaining why humanity had just set fire to 50 Velkari systems. "For months we tried to negotiate in good faith," she said, her voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. "We offered compromise. We offered cooperation. We offered peace. The Velkari answered by murdering 237 of our people. They answered with an ultimatum, demanding we abandon our homes. They asked us what we would do about it." She gestured, and holographic displays showed the attacks on Velkari military targets. Ships burning. Stations collapsing. The organized chaos of human strike forces hitting targets with precision the galaxy didn't think possible. "This is what we do about it," Sujin continued. "We are not conquerors. We don't seek to rule others. But we will not be ruled. We will not be exterminated." The Velkari thought we were weak because we chose diplomacy. They learned otherwise. In the Velkari Imperial Palace, Emperor Thrall-Anax watched the same broadcast with mounting rage. Around him, his military council scrambled to explain how this had happened. How had primitive humans penetrated their defenses? How had they destroyed so many ships? How had they boarded the Dominion's fist and captured a High Admiral? "Gather everything," Thrall-Anax commanded. "Every ship, every weapon, every soldier. These insects will learn their place. We will crush their worlds into dust and make an example that lasts for millennia." High Admiral Verkith bowed. "Your Majesty, we can mobilize 6,000 warships. But the humans have technology we don't understand. Their stealth capabilities. I don't care about their tricks," Thrall-Anax interrupted. "Bring every ship to the threshold system. We will meet their forces in open battle and destroy them through sheer numbers. Quantity is its own quality. They may have clever tactics, but tactics don't matter when you're outnumbered 30-1. The order went out across Velkari space. 6,000 warships began converging on the threshold system, a neutral zone near the border of human and Velkari territory. It would be the largest fleet action in 300 years. The Velkari were certain it would end with humanity's complete destruction. Meanwhile, on Terra Nova, scientist Bio Ra Jung worked frantically in her laboratory. She was 41, specialized in xenotechnology, and for the past 3 months she had been studying captured Velkari quantum disruptors. The weapons gave Velkari ships a huge advantage in direct combat, tearing through human shields like paper. "I think I have it," she told Admiral Ji Wu over a secure channel. "The quantum disruptors use a specific frequency to destabilize matter at the molecular level. If we can introduce a virus into their targeting computers, we can shift that frequency by just a few decimals. The weapons will still fire, but they'll be harmless. Like trying to cut steel with a beam of light. Can you deploy it remotely? Ji Woo asked. I can code it into infiltrator drones. They're small enough that the Velkari sensors won't register them as threats. Once the drones get close to their ships, they'll inject the virus directly into the computer networks. How long do you need? Be'ara looked at her readouts. 4 days. Maybe 3 if I skip sleep. You have 2 days, Ji Woo said. The Velkari fleet will reach threshold in 70 hours. We need that virus ready before they arrive. Be'ara nodded and turned back to her work. She would make it happen. She had to dot at Nexus Station. Other alien species began to quietly shift their allegiances. The insectoid Chirax coalition approached Ambassador Su Jin with an offer of intelligence sharing. The crystalline luminar Concordat provided sensor technology that could detect Velkari ships at twice the normal range. Even species that remained officially neutral started finding ways to help humanity without openly declaring themselves. They're afraid of you now, the Chirax ambassador clicked through his translator. The Velkari ruled through fear for centuries. Now humanity has shown that fear can flow both directions. Many of us are grateful, even if we cannot say so publicly. When the 2 days were up, Biore delivered. Her virus was loaded onto 300 infiltrator drones, each smaller than a human fist, each invisible to Velkari sensors. Fleet Commander Dong Hyan-oh deployed them into the threshold system ahead of the Velkari. Arrival. Dong Hyan was 61, a veteran of humanity's expansion into space, and he had spent 40 years studying military history. He knew about Thermopylae, about the Alamo, about every time in human history when a smaller force had faced impossible odds. He also knew that sometimes the smaller force won. Gravity well generators in position, his tactical officer reported. When the Velkari fleet arrives, we can lock them in place. All ships report ready. Strike craft deployed. Infiltrator drones confirmed an enemy approach vector. Donghan studied the tactical display. Humanity had assembled 1,200 warships for this battle, everything they had. Against 6,000 Velkari vessels, the math still seemed impossible. But math didn't account for human ingenuity. The Velkari fleet emerged from hyperspace in a formation that stretched across millions of kilometers. So many ships that they blotted out the stars. Sensors screamed warnings as 6,000 weapons locked onto human targets. The Velkari commander sent a single message: surrender or die. Donghayan responded simply, come and take us. The Velkari fleet advanced. As they crossed into the threshold system's gravity well, hidden generators activated. Space itself seemed to twist, locking the Velkari ships in place. They couldn't jump to hyperspace. They couldn't maneuver. For a crucial 30 seconds, they were sitting targets. Be'ara's virus activated. Across 6,000 ships, quantum disruptors charged and fired and did nothing. The Velkari watched in confusion as their most powerful weapons became useless. Before they could adapt, human strike craft swarmed them, hitting ships that suddenly had no shields. No working weapons, no defenses. All ships, fire at will, Donghayan ordered calmly. What followed wasn't a battle. It was a massacre. Velkari ships exploded by the hundreds, unable to fight back, unable to escape. In 2 hours, 4,000 Velkari warships were destroyed or disabled. The survivors finally managed to break free of the gravity well and retreat incomplete. Disorder. Donghayan broadcast one message on all frequencies: surrender or be destroyed. Choose quickly. 6 months had passed since the Battle of Threshold. Ambassador Dae-ho Kim walked through the corridors of Nexus Station, heading toward Conference Room 7, the same room where his negotiations with the Velkari had failed so catastrophically. Everything looked the same, but everything had changed. This time, humanity came to the table as victors. This time, the galaxy watched with respect rather than dismissal. This time, the Velkari came begging for peace. Daiho entered the room and found it already occupied. The Velkari delegation stood at the far end, but these weren't the same arrogant representatives from before. High Arbiter Thelvin was gone, arrested by his own people and awaiting trial for crimes against the Dominion. Emperor Thrall Lanix had been deposed in a palace coup after the disaster at Threshold Dot. In their place stood reformist Prime Velkara, a Velkari who had opposed the war from the beginning. She was smaller than Thelven had been, her 4 eyes showing what Daiho had learned to recognize as genuine remorse. "Ambassador Kim," she said through her translator. And this time, the device managed to convey actual emotion. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us." Daiho gestured to the table. "Please, sit. We have much to discuss." Behind him, Captain Young-Mi Park took her position along the wall, but her stance was different now. More confident. More assured. The rest of the human delegation included Dr. Tae-Soon Lee, along with legal experts and military advisors. This time, humanity wasn't asking for anything. This time, they were dictating terms. "The war is over," Velkara began. "Our military is broken. Our people are frightened. We came seeking peace, but we understand we are not in a position to demand anything." "You understand correctly," Daiho said, but his voice wasn't harsh. "However, humanity didn't enter this war for conquest. We fought because you forced us to fight. We won because we had no choice but to win. Now we can finally have the conversation we should have had 6 months ago." He pulled up the treaty terms on the holographic display. Velkara and her delegation reviewed them in silence. The terms were harsh, but not devastating. The Velkari would cede control of the disputed frontier reaches. They would pay reparations for the Endeavor massacre and the costs of the war. Their military would be limited for the next decade. War crimes tribunals would be established to prosecute those responsible for the attack on human civilians, but humanity wasn't demanding the Velkari dissolve their government or surrender their sovereignty. No occupation, no permanent subjugation, just accountability and respect. "These terms are more generous than we deserve," Velkara said quietly. "They're more generous than your predecessor offered us," Daiho replied. "We remember what happened when we came seeking peace. We also remember that not all Velkari supported what was done. You and others like you argued against the war. That matters." Over the next week, the final details were negotiated. A joint administration for the frontier reaches, where both species would work together. Cultural exchange programs. Trade agreements. Slowly, carefully, humanity and the Velkari began building something that should have been built 6 months earlier. On Terra Nova, President Haijin Nam addressed the Coalition Council one final time before stepping down. She was 64 now, looking older than when the war had started. The burden of ordering Project Prometheus had aged her visibly. "We won," she said simply. "But victory came at a cost. 800 of our ships never came home. 12,000 people died in the war. Another 400 were killed before the war even began. These numbers are small compared to what might have been, but each number represents a person, a life, a future stolen." She looked around at the assembled counselors, many of them new faces elected during the war. "The galaxy sees us differently now. We are respected. We are feared. 200 alien species have requested alliance with humanity. Our territory has expanded to over 100 worlds. We are, by any measure, a galactic power. But power comes with responsibility. We must never become what we fought against. We must never treat other species the way the Valkyrie treated us. Yes, we know how to make war, but that knowledge should make us more committed to peace, not less. Admiral Ji Woo sat in his office, reviewing demobilization plans. Project Prometheus was being scaled back, its most devastating weapons placed in storage where they would hopefully never be needed again. The stealth carriers were being converted to exploration vessels. The strike craft were being reassigned to defense roles. But Ji Woo made sure certain assets remained ready, hidden, just in case. The galaxy had learned that humanity could fight when necessary, but that didn't mean all threats had disappeared. Vigilance would be eternal. Captain Hyun Woo Lim stood at a memorial on the CSS Sejong, now decommissioned and converted into a museum. The memorial listed every name from the Endeavor. 237 people who had died simply because the Valkyrie thought they could kill with impunity. Hyun Woo placed a hand on the cold metal, feeling the weight of everything that had followed their deaths. "We made them pay," he whispered. "Not just for you, but so it never happens again." On a frontier colony called New Seoul, a young girl named Min Seo Park played in the streets with her friends. She was 7 years old, born just before the war. Her parents had sheltered her from most of the horror. But she knew humanity had fought and won against a powerful enemy. Min Seo looked up at the stars visible in the afternoon sky, wondering what was out there. What other species waited to be discovered? Would they be friends or enemies? The thought didn't frighten her. Humanity had proven it could handle both. Ambassador Dae-ho stood on Nexus Station's observation deck, watching ships from 100 different species come and go. The Nexus Accords had been signed, establishing a new galactic order with humanity as one of the guarantor powers. Never again would a strong species be allowed to simply exterminate a weaker one. Never again would might make right without consequence. Velkara approached and stood beside him, looking out at the same view. "What you did to us," she said softly, "other species have attempted before. They failed because we were stronger. You succeeded because you were smarter. The Valkyrie won't forget that lesson." "I hope not," Dae-ho replied. "But I also hope you learned the right lesson. We didn't win because we're superior beings. We won because we had no choice. Given the option, we would have taken the peace we tried to negotiate 6 months ago." "I know," Valkara said. "That's what makes humanity dangerous. You're good at war, but you don't want war. Species that love fighting are easy to understand. Species that hate fighting but excel at it when necessary, those are the ones that change history." Dae-ho smiled slightly. "Then let's make sure we change history in the right direction." Across the galaxy, humanity's story spread. The species that had faced extinction and refused to submit. The people who had taken on an empire and won through cleverness and courage. Some species admired them. Some feared them. Some wanted to be like them. But everyone understood one truth now. Humanity would fight when pushed. They would sacrifice when necessary. They would do whatever it took to protect their own. And they would do it with a combination of tactical brilliance and savage determination that made them unlike any species the galaxy had seen before. In the end, that was humanity's greatest strength. Not their weapons or their ships or their technology. Their refusal to give up. Their ability to stare into the abyss and fight back even when victory seemed impossible. The galaxy had learned that lesson, written in fire across 50 systems. Peace had finally come. But it was a peace built on respect, not fear. Built on understanding, not domination. The Valkyrie had asked what humanity would do when faced with extinction. The answer echoed across the stars. Whatever it takes. Always whatever it takes, and the galaxy would never forget.